Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening, or good morning, or afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this. Welcome to the 84th of hopefully many episodes of Bard Advice, a D&D slash TTRPG slash nerdcore anime, sports, music, whatever podcast, where I, Charles Chaz Yazik, the DM, the Bard, however you may know me, do my best to answer any questions that you might have. So, as we like to do, hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for joining us today. What we'd like to do, as we always like to do at the top of the hour, before we get into that stuff, is I would like to, just before I forget, thank all of our members, our patrons, our super chatters. Remind everybody to please like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, rate the podcast on your respective platforms. Remind everybody of the email for the show, which is bardadvice@gmail.com. It also looks like bardadvice. If you've got any questions, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques, etc., please send all of those there, bardadvice@gmail.com. If you'd like to get some merch, you can do so over at manschwartz.com, or more notably as of late over at krakendice.com. You can pick up one of our 4 limited run dice sets that we've released with Kraken this year. And if you'd like to contribute to anything that I'm doing musically, you can do so directly via PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo, all of which are Yazik, Yahzick. All right, so I think that's all of the general housekeeping. Oh yes, and of course join the Discord. I'm sure that someone's put a link in there, or please do if you haven't already. And oh yes, and thank you, Chris. Kraken also has a summer sale, and our Man Schwartz dice are included. So that's a great point. If you want to go and get some of those dice for a discounted rate, head on over to krakendice.com and get yourself a set. All right, so hope everybody's doing well. Tonight we have 7 questions, and then we'll do a little chat. Before we get into all of that, though, I would like to do some Art Corner. I have a couple of things that I wanted to mention about that. So the first of which is a series that my wife and I have started watching on Netflix called The Decameron. I think it's really funny. It's a comedic show that's actually based on a series of stories, but it is set in, I believe, the 1300s Italy during the Black Death, and there's just a lot of weird, crazy stuff that goes on with some sort of plague going on, in addition to a lot of these people being wealthy and a little bit like socially awkward and out of touch, and just lends itself to a lot of really what I think are humorous interactions and stories. I think it's well written and the characters are well portrayed. So it's definitely worth checking out on Netflix, The Decameron. The other thing that I wanted to mention to everyone, and we'll talk a little bit about this more later in today's episode, but I did just want to let everybody know that I am I'm finishing up the final touches on an AI album that I've made with not only with AI, but also with my friend Songaria. It's called The Middle Ages, and it is about basically just getting older into your late 30s, early to mid 40s, and just the stuff that comes with that and kind of dealing with that. We can go into a little more detail about the details surrounding that stuff in general, but just wanted to give everybody a heads up. I'm not completely sure how I'm going to be releasing that as of yet, because still kind of like vague on what the actual rules are. Obviously, Suno and Udio are currently in litigation with UMG and several of the other major music distributing companies. So still a little up in the air as to what the rules are for that. But I want to do it in a way that's accessible for people. But I also don't want to put myself or others in a position where there's going to be pushback from either distributors and or platforms that those distributors distribute to. So I'd like to avoid that if I can. Speaking of which, I did put a link in the description of this video to the Florida Man song that I recently wrote with AI, and that one's really fun. So if you're on the Discord, you might have already seen it, but if you haven't seen it, there's a link for it in the description of this video. It's also on the music tab in the Discord. So, all right. Well, I think that's everything that we wanted to do at the beginning. Thanked everybody. Did the email, Florida Man, Art Corner. Okay. So let's get into it. The next question, or I should rather say the first question of the evening, is from Riley. And Riley asks, "Greetings, DM. Writing in for the first time to ask a would you rather. Would you rather run a character that can only speak in riddles or a character that is mute? Wow, thank you for the question, Riley. This one, I gotta say, is kind of a no-brainer for me. Feel free to sound off in the comments as to what you would do, but it's definitely going to be the riddle character for me. And first of all, there's no way that I could be more, I couldn't be quiet for more than 5 minutes in any capacity, whether that's in character or not. It's not going to happen. I don't think I've been quiet for longer than 5 minutes, maybe ever, in my whole life. So that's not going to happen, whether it's like role-playing or not. The only way that you could get me to be quiet for longer than 5 minutes is if there was like serious money involved. Like if you told me that like for every minute I was quiet, I'd get like $5, I might take a whole vow of silence. But it's incredibly unlikely that I'm going to be quiet for any considerable amount of time. Also, the riddles lends itself to kind of, not necessarily annoying, but maybe just kind of like poking fun with the rest of the party, both in and out of game. So I'm always down for that. And I can always opt to just not speak. I can always just opt to not speak as opposed to being forced to not speak. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm a mute, I always have to be mute. But if I can only speak in riddles, I don't necessarily always have to speak in riddles because I can be, you know, maybe quiet for 30 seconds to a minute and then I don't have to worry about riddles. That might get tricky really fast. I'd probably just have to have like a riddle book with me. Where it's just like constantly doing it. Riddles are fun, but so much brain work. Yeah, definitely. Riddles would be fun, but I'm sure I'd run out of witty ones quickly. Mute could be entertaining if your mime skills were on point. That's true if you were a bardic mime. But that would probably get pretty tired fast, too. Think mute for me. Mute, I don't think I could make multiple riddles. Yeah, that's an incredible amount of prep work, too, because you kind of have to, like, account for anything that you might find yourself wanting to say, as well as backups for, like, situations where it's like, because I imagine, too, that if I were in a situation where I was either one of these things, whoever was DMing would probably make it a point to have me have to interact with, like, NPCs and stuff. So even if I tried to, like, avoid something by not saying anything or by saying something in particular, then they'd probably push it. So one bad riddle would ruin the immersion. Mute is much more doable. Yeah, well, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a talker. I feel like I feel like doing the riddles would be easier for me. I could just put together like a list of which ones that I would want to do. It would probably work, I guess, if you were mute and you were a bardic mime and that was kind of your thing. As a mute, you could sign or whistle. That's true. Ooh, that's a good point. Now I'm rethinking this. Because if that were the case, then I could just constantly talk out of character. What about in song? That's not fair at all for me. I'll tell you, working with this AI music stuff, like I've been writing lyrics like a madman for the last few weeks. My skill set for riddles is probably head and shoulders above the average person player. Well, that's kind of you. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm not much of a riddle guy. I got dad jokes. I got puns for you. I don't know how good I'd be on the riddles. And it would likely also be a thing where I would only use the riddles. See, I would get a riddle book, and then I would just make kind of like a list of coded language where if I wanted to say a specific thing, I'd say it. Because it doesn't specify that you wouldn't be able to repeat riddles. And if that's the case, you really could just create your own language that the party could learn as you go, because you say the same riddle to say the same thing. Know what I mean? Shadow puppets. For me, I'd prefer riddles only in terms of ancient writings. Riddles from a live NPC isn't something I could see doing. For a wizard, teller over pen. Shadow puppets, yeah. I immediately think of like Allegory of the Cave. You get a lot of like communication accomplished that way, I suppose. I'm Groot is a riddle, I guess. Yeah, that's the other thing. What's a riddle? What specifies as a riddle? because usually it's like a question, right? But not always. What about the Riddler? He sometimes he just says stuff, and then it's like you got to figure it out with context clues. ChatGPT does riddles pretty well, I bet. I've not ever asked it for them, but I bet I could get a bunch of good ones. And then I just have like a wealth of a, like a language key to go off of to use as my communication. A question or a statement intentionally, so it can be a statement, intentionally phrased as to require ingenuity in ascertaining its answer or meaning, typically presented as a game. Yeah, I could probably do that. With those as the direct guidelines, I mean, I'm sure that's just the definition, but you know what I mean? I could pull that off. Way easier than just being quiet. So, just say riddle me this and then say what you're going to say. That'd be fun. Yeah, I might do that too, where it's just like I restructure the sentence of what I actually want to say in a way that makes it seem like a riddle. Because it also doesn't specify that the riddles necessarily have to have right answers. So, I don't know. Now I'm just kind of splitting hairs about it, but that's where I'm at. I'm going riddles all day. Thank you for the question, Riley, and thank you for writing in. Send more questions in. Much appreciated. So the next question of the evening is from James. And James asks, how's it going, Yazzik? My name is James, and I recently got into content creation. Bless you. Twitch, streaming, YouTube videos, etc. I've been streaming my gameplay, and I have been making clipped videos of things that I have done in-game. The problem I'm having with it is I can't seem to get it to take off. I have seen where people have given up on trying content creation due to a lack of followers, and I'm not trying to go out like that. My question is, do you have any advice you can give to keep me going with it? Any do's or don'ts? I've been watching your content for years now, and I figured I'd ask the Bard himself. Any advice that you can give someone who is getting into the content creation field? Thanks for your help. Thank you very much for the question, James. It's kind of you to ask me. I'm not too much of an authority on on that, but I can speak to it a bit, I suppose. So let's see. I've got an answer here for it. And if anybody in chat has any recommendations that they'd like to give, even if you're not somebody who makes content, you're probably somebody that consumes content. You're consuming this content. So you could maybe give some thoughts or ideas as to like what you like to see or what would work for you. So first of all, give yourself credit for what you're already doing. Take it from somebody who didn't make money on this stuff for over a decade. It can be a slow burn. And even if you're lucky enough to catch that flame, it may not last as long as maybe you anticipated or wanted to. So I said all of that to say that the first thing I would do more than anything is make sure that you love what you're doing. Because in my experience with this, like trying to make money, make a living with your art is really, really difficult. And you have to love it, or otherwise you would be crazy to do it. So inevitably, when something becomes a job, even if you love it, it can get tired. It can feel not as rewarding. And, that's also coming from somebody who's made pretty decent money for the last like 4 to 5 to 6 years on just content in general, not just like the podcast and the editions and the music and all the above. As for actual production, I think that consistency and more recently realness, I think, are key. But I've said before about Mann shorts, which it's harder to say now since we've been kind of sporadic in our posting lately. But, there was a good solid 3 years there where we were dropping a video every week. And the fact that we posted on Sundays, in my opinion, I still think is more important than the content that we post. Because in my experience, your audience will find you. And it'll likely just happen in a way that you didn't particularly anticipate it. So if you love it and you believe in it, just keep making it. I think that the journey is the destination. And also, like, on the realness thing, too, I think that my generation growing up, like, the idea of celebrity or somebody that was famous, because, before the internet, it was just like whatever was on TV or the radio or in the newspaper, literally. And so with the internet became this thing where it was like, oh, now there's these, like somebody like a streamer who is like got kind of a cult of personality thing going on. And that's all to say that there was almost like a level of like behavior expectation or like performance expectation from like quote unquote celebrities, I think, like back in the day, just because there were less of them. And now that there's so many people, and with the internet you can afford to just be in your own lane and consume whatever content you want to, then I think that people just relate to who you are as a person. The younger generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, are definitely that way because they, unlike my generation, saw through the nonsense pretty early on. And so they kind of crave realness. They're not really into like the characters and the performance as much as they're just into like people kind of being themselves. And I found a lot of success in that with this, in particular with this podcast, is I feel like I try to keep it real. Like obviously I put on a bit of a slight performance where it's kind of like I'm hosting this thing. But at the end of the day, it's really just like me talking and just being honest with my feelings about stuff. So I think that that's huge. So especially if you're doing stuff like long form content like streaming, which to be honest, that's tough competition right now just in general because of the way the algorithms are going, because everybody wants to try and compete with TikTok. And so everything's going short form and just like rapid fire dopamine brain rot stuff. And so it's not to say that the long form doesn't exist. It's just that the platforms themselves are not huge on pushing it. Obviously, a platform like Twitch is a little different because their bread and butter is live streaming. And so that's a different kind of engagement. But I'd say consistency in terms of posting as well as just like scheduling, the best that you can. Obviously, you're going to miss a week here and there. You're going to be delayed a day here and there. But yeah, I think that's the big thing. Support from friends and family, yes, most definitely. I couldn't do anything that I do without my wife, without my friends, without my family, my mom. So that's a big thing too, is just like leaning on other people for support. And sometimes that's tough. It's harder when you're not making money. When you're not making money, it's a lot easier for people to not be supportive. But when you start turning it into a career, it's like, there's a different kind of level of respect and support from people. So just keep going. That's my biggest piece of advice. Just keep doing it because it'll grow. And if you love it, then you're going to be happy anyway. You know what I mean? That's what I was saying about like making sure you love the thing, because I'm always going to make stuff. And, obviously we've had a bit of a downturn in terms of just like our general viewership and sponsors and stuff, but that's never going to deter me from making stuff. Like if tomorrow I woke up and we had no followers, I'm still going to make stuff. So do please reach out. Let's see. YouTube shorts are okay sometimes, but I like the longer stuff. Yeah, I'm the same. It is, River. And I was just talking about this today about TikTok. The thing about TikTok is you got to know what it is. And it's junk food. It's junk food for your brain. It's junk food content. And that's okay. There's not anything wrong with that. I enjoy it quite a bit. But just like with anything else, with this social media stuff and politics and religion, and just don't let it absorb you. You got to just like treat it as such. It's the same thing with AI. Everybody's freaked out about AI. It's like it's just a thing. Don't let yourself get so wrapped into like identity or like explanation of these things. Like just let them be things, No Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, I hear you, Avram. I'm honestly the same way. Like really the only reason I have the socials that I do is for like marketing purposes, but I'm not very good at that. So I'm not the best person to ask. But yeah, I'd say just like be honest with your audience about your craft and make sure that you love it and just keep doing it. And the audience will come. They'll show up. Like there are people here every Friday for bardadvice. So thank you for the question, James. Hopefully something in there can help you, or at least, point you in the right direction. That's just my opinions. I'm not like an authority on it, but I do have a little experience in both making a living and not making a living making art. And on the other side of that, I still continue to make it. So that's just like my opinion, man. All right. So thank you again for the question, James. Much appreciated. Best of luck to you. Oh, and before I forget, I was going to say, I didn't say it. I guess I didn't write it in this. I guess I didn't write it in here, but send me your info and I can just plug you in Art Corner next week or whenever. bardadvice@gmail.com. Send me an email with your stuff and I can, maybe we can send some people your way. And yes, thank you. Don't forget to like the stream. That's much appreciated. It's good for the algorithm. All right, the next question, as some of you might be competent in guessing, is from Chris. And Chris asks, road trip time, what kind of snacks do you think each class would bring? Oh boy, I gotta say, these questions are quickly becoming my favorite ones to answer because it's just such a fun little exercise. So feel free to sound off in the comments. I'm going to go through the classes alphabetically, and I'm just going to give my opinions on what they would bring. So Barbarian's going to have some sort of a jerky, right? Clearly, probably like beef jerky or like elk jerky or something. Bard's going to have some kind of a fun junk food, like licorice or gummy bears. Cleric has fruit, which is like a healthy and practical staple. Maybe even like citrus. Druid has trail mix and or granola, something healthy and earthy that could also be shared with hungry animals that they might meet along the way. Fighters would have protein bars and energy drinks, just staying hyped up in the gym, athletic. Monks keep it simple with bread or maybe even rice cakes. Paladins would bring cheese and crackers. I don't know why. It's another traditional kind of staple, I guess. The Rangers are going to bring dried meat and berries. Rogues, I've got having like candied nuts and sunflower seeds for some reason. I also feel like rogues would have like bubble gum. Just because. Just as like maybe a MacGyver situation, but also a treat, Maybe a flask of potent liquor. Rogue's probably got a lot of stuff going on as far as snacks. Sorcerer has some spicy-based soup, perhaps even a chili. Warlock's got Capri Suns and dark chocolate. And for the wizard, he's got chips and pretzels, slightly fun, but mostly basic. Which I guess is how I consider chips and pretzels to be. So, all right, let me see what's going on here. Druids, nuts, and berries. Bring snacks. I'm a rogue. I'll just steal any snack I want. That's true. Yeah, the rogue just shows up empty-handed, but somehow leaves with the fullest belly. Rogue would bring your beef sticks and beer. Rangers, nothing. Find it on the way. Oh, that's a good point, too, Kirk. Yeah, the ranger would probably just be like, well, we'll just find something. Cleric wine, obviously. Barbs have pocket bacon. What does he call it in It's Always Sunny? It's not. It's sausages, right? Aren't they like pocket sausages that Danny DeVito has and It's Always Sunny? Paladins would bring Jello casserole. Yeah, that does kind of sound like a paladin dish. Rogue chewing and popping gum. Rogues have a bag of hard candies and some moonshine. Rogue would have popcorn. Wizard and sort cookies and cakes and junk and stuff. Let the rogue have a purse with fried chicken in it just cuz. I'm a bugbear barbarian. I'll eat a trash can if there's meat in it. That's a good point. Yeah. Depending on the character, you might just be able to find your snacks along the way. Can I offer you an egg in this trying time? Every time I think of Danny DeVito's character and It's Always Sunny, I think of so anyways, I start blasting. It's just like such an insane thing. $2. Thank you for the donation, Nolly. You're on daily rotation on 143 stations, heavy on 16. Wow. That's awesome. That's great news. Much appreciated. One of the best meme templates out there. Yeah, 100%. Well, Sunny in general. Oh, man. I see clips from them all the time. It's just one of the funnier shows, I think. Who would have the Coca-Cola flavored Oreos and the Oreo flavored Coca-Cola? I don't know. That sounds like Warlock stuff. Warlock and Rogue stuff. Chaos Sorks. Oh, man. That's funny. Well, that was fun. I really liked those. And in fact, there's another one of those this episode that we'll talk about. But I love snacks. Yeah. I'm a snacks guy myself. Who's bringing the hash brownies? I mean, either the bard or the druid. Maybe both. Of course, druid might just bring like magic mushrooms. So that's that's a little bit of a different experience, brother. Okay, so that's all for that one. Thank you for the question, Chris. That was fun. The next question of the evening, according to the list of names, is from Mike. And Mike asks, what does the DM bring? The DM brings, I don't know, something practical like water. Be a thing that people would forget. Everybody I've ever played with is either a drug dealer or flirting with everyone. Yeah, bards are unhinged, for sure. All right, so the next question is from Mike, as I mentioned. Thanks for the question, Chris. Mike asks, hello, Charles. First of all, love the videos. My question is about pacing. I've been a DM for a few years now and have a few campaigns under my belt. This current one is a homebrew, and it's moving along much more slowly than I anticipated. Yeah, that'll happen. We haven't had much progress in the last few sessions. How can I speed things along without railroading or making players feel rushed? Thanks. Thank you for the question, Mike. Hopefully I've got something that can answer that for you. Oh, a basket that the DM brings to sample everybody's snacks. That's actually a great point, just like a basket to accept offerings. All right, so let's talk about pacing. This is a good question, and I appreciate it, Mike. So I will speak a little bit about what I wrote down. People, DMs in chat, let us know what recommendations or answers you might have in regard to pacing. Pacing can be a challenge, especially if you've got a party full of murder hobos, power gamers. We've talked about this before, I think, and I always tell people I think that the most important thing you can do in these kind of scenarios is remember that you're the DM, right? So if you can't get your players to move on to the next area, you're one spontaneous portal away from the party being where they're supposed to be, from putting them in the right place. You know, they don't want to talk to the NPC. They got to have the NPC start talking to them. Have them arrested for violating some goofy law, and now they're being transported to a prison, and they have to escape the police carriage, and then when they do, then they're where they need to be. Obviously, you don't want to railroad too much, but in my experience, I think you can always retcon lore or story to explain yourself. And by the way, that's assuming that you come under scrutiny for it at all. Some players, you kind of have to hold their hand and guide them to the next step. I'm a little bit that way. I'm not very observant, just as a person, but in general as a player. And so more than one time, and in my gaming experience, has Ethan or our original Forever DM Posey they've kind of had to be like, okay, well, what about this over here? Because I won't do the thing right. I'm kind of a wanderer, as it were. And sometimes we can let that get away from the goal if there's good RP and the characters are kind of interacting. But then sometimes you can find that you're just sitting around and you're not really making too much progress. Overall, I would say not to be afraid to flex your DM authority in terms of moving the story along. It is your world, after all. They're just adventuring in it. So you can kind of create whatever scenario you want to, right? If they're taking too long in, even something simple as like giving them some sort of a timer, right? Or some sort of maybe they receive a message from the person that they're supposed to be doing the quest for, and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Like, hurry it up. This time is of the essence. Even something like that that's just kind of like a small nudge can put that in their mind that it's like, because if they are players that need, even if it's just one or two, but if there are players that kind of need their handheld and you're not really doing that for fear of not wanting to railroad too much, then that's kind of a perfect combo of not doing anything. Because if you're not going to railroad and they're not going to take initiative, you're just going to be in town all day just talking, making jokes. So remember that you're the DM, and the campaign, or at least like the session and the world, kind of live and die at your will. So just keep that going. Let me see what people are saying in the chat. Tell them if they don't hurry up, I'll take away the snacks. Let your players choose where to go and put any of the important story stuff in their path. That way you railroad them without feeling railroaded. Yeah, and I do that a lot, and I imagine Ethan's done it before. Because sometimes you just can't help it, right? Sometimes there's a path that goes east and a path that goes west, and you know in your head as the DM that the eastern path is the one they need to go to, and they go west every time. So you have to make the decision. Is the path now west? Is there going to be something that where the path is blocked or there's a cliff and they have to turn around and go east? So it's a little bit, there's a little bit of improv there, but also, just lighting that fire under them, whether it's like in real life or like in the story. If they refuse to move on, then move the BBED's timetable forward. Let them see the effects of their inaction. That's a good point. Yeah, you could start doing stuff like blowing up cities. That'll get them moving. Start rolling dice to get the players' attention. That's true. If the party needs a nudge, give them a reminder. Then a while later, make them make a perception check. If they fail, fear motivates. There might be events in the story where timing matters, but in the real world, you can run the game as fast or slow as you want, so long as the players are engaged and having fun. That matters more. That's true. A lot of players lack a motivation to move on is that they barely remember where they are or what they were doing. Recapping, even in the middle of a session, is always okay. That's true. I'm not the greatest listener. I'm also, as I mentioned before, a wanderer, so a lot of times, not only will I not know what's going on in real life, my character might not know what's going on because they were in a different room looking through a trunk when that conversation was had. So, yeah, recaps are important. The player, a falcon drops down from the heavens and drops a message bottle from his talons. Take 2d6 of damage or take half with a reflex save. If the players are bored and the plot isn't moving, then you maybe haven't made things obvious enough. Have an NPC ask a question that leads them in the right direction. Yeah, something. I think that's the move, is like a simple nudge with either an NPC or even directly as the DM, just being like, well, you guys haven't explored this area. Ethan does that stuff a lot because we're goobers, we're goofballs, we're just joking around, being silly geese, and we've got stuff to do. So Ethan will be like, well, you haven't you haven't explored the lake area, and then we're all like, oh yeah, let's go do that. Tend to have the same guy show up and get snarky when they all stalled, adds comedy and a hint to move on, leaves them wondering how Bob the Bard ended up in the cell next to them again. Players can and will ignore important NPCs for the silly goblin gnome NPC. Yeah, that's and the thing is like whoever they pick, that's the NPC. If you've got an NPC planned and then they pick somebody else, just shift all of that stuff onto them because that's who they're gonna talk to. Yeah, we're talking about a certain peppercorn. Studebaker, to be exact. It's actually a great point. Give them a list of their current tasks and what they have to do before the next session. Competitive NPCs. Ooh, that's a great point. That's a great one. Thank you for that, Henry. Yeah, competitive NPCs. There's another adventuring group that also wants to save the world, and they're further along. And maybe they get a notice about that. Hey, you guys are falling behind the other team. That's motivation right there. The plot seems obvious to you because you made it up. The players may well have no idea. Yeah, and I have to remind myself that as a writer too, right? When you're talking about like anything, really, lyrics or a D&D campaign or a novel or a movie, like that happens quickly, where you start to question your own work and you're like, this feels stupid, or like, oh, that's too obvious. And it's like, it's obvious to you. You made it up. It's always going to be obvious to you. But you'd be surprised the amount of times that I have put out an episode of an edition that I thought, this is really stupid, it's not going to hit. And then people think it's hilarious. And like with lyrics, where like there are songs that I grew to like really, there have been songs that I've made that I've grown to really dislike, simply because, especially with rap, is because I've heard that beat 7,000 times when I was writing the verse. So now that the actual song is out and available, it's like not really that fun to listen to, at least for me. So yeah, that's something else too. But step into your DM power, you know? Just make the story how you want to make the story. Create a Gary to their Ash. Spontaneously pops up to keep things in check. Yeah, for sure. Spontaneous portal. Doesn't necessarily have to be one they go through. Maybe it's one Gary from Pokemon comes through. And it's like, now they have competition. That's an immediate way to light a fire, I think, if they can band together to compete with some NPC party. Have an NPC who can only answer questions related to the plot, or only say one thing like, welcome to Jumanji, please take the path to the left for your rewards. That's true. Yeah, you can always dumb it down however you want to. Because like I said, you can retcon all of that stuff. You can explain it away later. All right. That was a good one. Thank you, Mike. That was a good question. All right. So the next question of the evening is from Dana? Yes, from Dana. And Dana asks, hi, Mr. Bard. I was curious about your opinion on game mechanics versus storytelling. As I recently started DMing, I sometimes find myself not knowing or even fully understanding rules and mechanics. I don't want to annoy anyone at the table by not knowing simple rules. How do you balance rule enforcement / mechanics versus a rich narrative? Thank you, and chat in advance. Thank you for the question, Dana. I'm not big on the rules myself in general. I mean, I know them, but I don't know them all. And I certainly don't know like super specific stuff that a lot of my rules lawyers friends would know. But this is how I feel. I've said before that I'm usually way more about the characters in the story than the actual combat rules or mechanics. This question, like many we've received, goes back to expectations of the party. If this is a group of hyper-competitive power gamers who want to focus on DPR and character optimization, you're probably going to want to spend some time learning and understanding as many of the rules as possible, particularly combat mechanics and things like damage types, spell types, etc. If the group is more casual and it's more about the roleplay aspect, just make sure you have a basic understanding of mechanics. You can put more of an emphasis on the story. Typically, in my experience, it's just been kind of very chill, and those kind of conversations about rules or raw really only come up in specific instances when you're trying to do a specific thing. And even those players who would credit themselves as like knowing all the rules probably still have to look stuff up. There's, the game's really dense. It is worth bringing up this concern, I think, to the party to see how they respond. We talk a lot about expectations in session 0 and stuff. They'll probably be a lot more reasonable about it than you think they would be. Because it could be a thing that they're not even aware of, and they're just going to be like, hey, no big deal. It's chill. Or it could be a thing where they're like, yeah, actually, maybe you should spend a little time. Maybe we should take a week off while you can study up and learn the rules. So let's see. What's people in chat saying? Rocks fall, everybody dies. That's the go-to. Sometimes players don't feel comfortable saying they feel lost, so a reminder of some railroading can be a gift. Oh, that's a good point for the last question. Have a player like my wife who takes notes on everything. Yes, notes are very, very invaluable, particularly if they're taken by somebody that's like relatively unbiased. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't trust my notes. I would prefer somebody take notes for me. You can always just con and seduce your players' characters into doing stuff. Thought that you would like to know. I've been listening while doing closing stuff for work, and your MOD has officially asked me to write down the name of the show. Oh, well, that's awesome. Thank you. He or she is welcome to join us. She's welcome. Maybe my next campaign I'll have them being followed by Lieutenant Leowin of Worcestershire the GIF. Is it GIF or GIF? I guess that's the same question we have about the images. Struggle with this too, but I like storytelling over mechanics. Yeah, I'm the same. And I think most of my friends are that way. I've really only ever played with like a couple of people that were like super into the mechanics. And even that I think was like role play to an extent, depending on what their character was. Sometimes getting the rules wrong makes the best campaign. And remember, the biggest secret is to not tell the DM that they don't actually need the rules. Yeah. This I also think is another opportunity. Yeah, did I say this? If the group's more casual and it's more about the roleplay aspect, just make sure you have a basic understanding of mechanics. You can put more emphasis on the story. This is another step into your DM power moment. Yeah, where ultimately you're the arbiter of what is or what isn't in the rules. So, that's the thing. Even if it goes against Raw, it's like, well, not in this world. That's just like, in this world, the rules are different, and that's actually not the case. Is this Calvin Ball? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I've in the last like week, I've seen two of my most favorite Calvin and Hobbes comics, but one of them that I'll always think is probably my favorite is the one where he's hammering the nails into the coffee table, and his mom comes in and she's like, "Calvin, what are you doing?" And he like looks at the coffee table and then he looks at her and he's like, "Is this a trick question?" Because it's like, I don't know, it's just really funny. I like whatever's funniest. Your spell fails and turns your left boot into a rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle. My players are told during session 0 that I homebrew, so rules are loose and my monsters are vastly different from the books. Homebrew overall, most definitely. Tend not to care about the rules. The rules should be there to help propel the story or combat forward, but then often tend to bog things down instead. It's important to know how or when to apply rules. Where we're going, we don't need rules. Yeah, I think overall, and I've said that before probably a bunch on this podcast, but like I think the end goal, I think, for everybody is to just have a good time. I would suspect that the players are probably less concerned about the rules than you think they are. They just want to have fun and have it be a good story. So I don't think that I've ever left a session even thinking about rules, let alone feeling like it was ruined by a rule. I suppose it could happen, but I think most people are just into it for the role play, Also, if you have a fun and safe game, encourage players to ask, "Can I?" And if it isn't raw, have them make a related check and make a decent DC and go for it if they make it. If the goal is storyline, rules are the internal canon. When it's consistent, it's straight. It takes away from the story. When it's inconsistent, it takes away from the canon. Well, that's a good point. I mean, there do have to be like some sort of a rules as far as the world goes. So I wouldn't stress too much about it, though. I'd have a conversation with the party about it and then just, do your best. That's all they really care about, I think. That's how most of us are. How most of us are, anyway. So, got to keep moving because we got 2 more questions. But thank you for the question, Dana. I hope there's something in there that you can use. There's a lot of good recommendations or things from chat there. All right, we've got another one of those classes questions, so I'm excited for that. So this one is from Dave. Thank you again for the question, Dana. This one is from Dave. Dave asks, "Hey Charles, I've sent in questions before, but recent episodes have inspired me to hop on this each class wagon and ask this. If each class were stranded on a desert island and could only have one item, what would they each have? Thanks for all the funnies." Thank you, Dave. Much appreciated. This was a really fun one, too. I like doing these. Feel free to send these in, folks, about the classes, because those are always a real hoot. Starting at the top, the barbarian has a weapon, probably a giant sword or an axe. The bard has an instrument, probably a lute, a flute, or a drum. Cleric is going to have some sort of holy symbol that's going to allow them to use channel divinity. Druids would probably have seeds and or good berries. Fighters would also have a weapon, but probably more like a regular-sized sword. Monks, I put, would bring some sort of a totem for meditation, like prayer beads or something of the like. Paladin's going to have a holy weapon. Rangers got a longbow. Rogues got a lockpick and or lockpicks. Sork has a wand or a crystal for arcane focus. Warlock has a packed book that holds all of their magic stuff, the tome. And the wizard has a spell book. So that's what I think that the people would have. what do you good people in chat think that they would have? Bard an audience. That'd be very helpful. I'm going to bring an audience. They're going to help me build a raft and escape the island. Scroll of teleport to get off the island. Well, this is also assuming, right, what's like, okay, it can't be that they knew that they were going there. But I guess they would have to know that they were going there if they only have one item. We got to maybe Gilligan's Island it. Let's assume that they didn't know they were going to be stranded. They only have one item with them. Wizard spellbook, yeah. Rogue would have his trusty pocket knife. Yeah, I was thinking that too for Rogue. Like, I settled on lockpick just because I feel like all rogues would have one of those on them at any given moment, regardless of the circumstances. So maybe that's almost a bonus to the dagger. Because my first thought, my knee-jerk instinct with the rogue was the dagger. But then I thought, oh, lockpick. Any character who can get shape water won't need a jug, but would probably want a net or fishing pole or spear. Sorcerers themselves, what more could they want? Why would you need a lockpick on a deserted island? Well, I don't know. What if there's like some ancient... What if this, pirate... You don't know what's going on this desert island. What if there's a trunk that has an inflatable raft in it, but it's locked? Probably be pretty good to have a lockpick then. Of course, I guess if you're the barbarian, you could just smash it open with a hammer or an axe or something. Cleric, holy symbol, sorc, spell focus. A monk brings the love of... Talus of Greek Shaw. Boat was sinking. They only had time to save one object. Yeah, there you go. Cleric prays every day for divine intervention. Problem solved, maybe. Oh, that's a good point. That's true. Yeah, where's your deity now? Clerics, paladins. Why don't you just ask them to get you off the island? Druids can just wild shape to swim. Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point. Or swim. They just turn into birds. Just fly away. Druids are out. They don't need anything. That's why they bring seeds. They're like, oh, here, we'll give you guys some seeds so you can grow fruit. I'm out of here. Thieves' tools are more than just lockpicks. That's true. But if you smash the chest open, you might damage the inflatable giant ducky. See? All the more reason why you need a lockpick. What was your answer for the barbarian? Did I miss that? The barbarian could just rip the latches off. That's true. Wait, did you say Warhammer? Did I read that? Did I scroll by too fast? Oh, no, that was someone else that's a barbarian Warhammer. Huh. Yeah. Well, I think that, I think that's it. Those are the items I think that they would all have. Very high-level monks, objects or distractions from the now. Yeah, most definitely. Monks would just be, like, meditating the whole time. So, cool. That was fun, once again. So thank you for the question, Dave. Please, folks, send in questions like that. Those are real fun, where you ask about each of the classes and what the deal is with them as to whatever the scenario is. All right, so we have one final question, and this one is a little extensive because I had quite a lot to say about it, and I'd be interested to see what other people's opinions are on it as well. And then we'll do a little chat and just go from there. So this last question is from Jimmy. And Jimmy asks, hey, Yaz, been a long-time listener of the pod and of your music. Last week you mentioned Suno AI music generator, and I wondered if you could talk a little more on your thoughts on it. As a person who has made tons of human music, are you worried about what this might do to the music industry? It seems like anyone can make music with the press of a button now. Thank you, and looking forward to new music. Thank you for the question, Jimmy. I tend to agree. It does seem that anybody could make music with the push of a button now. I, for one, find that incredibly exciting because I think... Well, we'll talk about what I think, because I spent a good amount of time writing this stuff down. So let me just try and get through it, and then people can feel free to voice their opinions on it in the chat. But this is what I wrote up about it. And this is kind of it's a little bit of a monologue. But so before I say how I feel about it, I want to give a little bit of a background about my relationship with music, just kind of a quick recap for anybody that doesn't know or may have forgotten. I've been playing music my whole life. I played piano when I was 6. I plunked around on keyboard through elementary school. In junior high, I learned the saxophone, played that through concert, marching band all through high school. Also played and marched tuba with Rigsby my senior year. Also in high school, I learned to play the guitar. Technically, I learned the bass first and then quickly switched to guitar and started a ska band that ran for a few years. Then in my early 20s, my friends and I started like a post-hardcore / emo, screamo band, which ran for several years. Started out as a 6-piece and ultimately ended as a 4-piece, like funk, rock, Red Hot Chili Peppers type band. So it was like quite the evolution, I think, musically over the years. Then for a few years, I wrote songs. I wrote solo songs on acoustic guitar, very Jack Johnson, just like very simple chords with a focus on the lyrics. I started rapping in 2009. I started rapping seriously in 2009, and I've been doing that since. And lately, I have chosen to dive headfirst into the AI music generation. So the reason that I said all of that stuff is to illustrate two things, which is that number one, I have an extensive background in both writing and performing lyrics, and an even longer background in writing in general, because I was a poet through most of my formative years as well. The second reason I said all of that is to show that my personal evolution and journey as an artist has, at least seemingly, pulled further and further away from the actual musical composition of the instruments. And I think that that's okay. For me, it's gotten way more about the lyrics. Hip hop is already like this, right? Like, obviously it takes significant skill to put together these beats, but most rap beats are on pretty standard loops. Like, once you hear the first 4 to 8 measures of a beat, you pretty much know what the beat is. At that point, you're just kind of listening to the lyrics, I would expect. So I think the idea that anybody can produce music, regardless of their background or skill set, is very exciting. Music is one of the only universal things that we have, right? It's like death, taxes, music. And so I think any tool that facilitates more of that is a good thing. I've said before, I compare it to the camera. I suspect that many painters found the camera to be a soulless box that anybody could use. And that's still true today, right? Anybody can take photographs. But we also now understand the nuance of photography. We understand that not everybody's a photographer, even though everybody can technically take photos. We know that professional or even amateur photographers put a lot of effort into understanding the conditions that surround their medium tool. So, sure, you can just push a button, but there's also things like lighting and exposure and angles, etc. Things that people who aren't photographers, by the way, don't really understand. In the same way, I don't think that AI image generation is going to kill painting or photography or graphic design. I don't think that AI music is going to destroy music as we know it. Now, it might disrupt the industry as we know it, but I think that could be a really good thing, because if everybody can make music, then theoretically the best music will rise to the top. Up to this point, there are gatekeepers, right? There's probably a handful of 10 to 15 white guys that are, probably locked in some fancy hotel room doing cocaine, that are making all the decisions about what happens with these artists' music, right? And, people say things like they're saying in the lawsuit, oh, well, with AI music, you can't just steal an artist's life's work. And it's well, what do you think a record label is? Right? Taylor Swift had to record a whole album worth of stuff just so she could say that it was her stuff. So I don't think that this kind of soulless attitude is being brought on by AI. I think it's kind of a different thing. Obviously, it's scary and it can be used for evil, but that kind of stuff's going to happen anyway. And people like me are going to make music regardless. This is just a different way to do it. But I've always felt that the medium isn't the art. I don't think it ever has been. And if anything, the medium is the obstacle to the art, right? The medium is what's standing in the way of me conveying an idea to somebody. So, okay, that's just where I'm at. Wow. So, as I said, that was a bit of a monologue. So, let me see what people have been saying in chat. Let's see. All hail our future AI overlords. Hopefully my loyalty will be rewarded. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely AI's gonna take over a lot of stuff. It's not just now. People could just create music years ago with autotune. Yeah, or like with See, the problem with saying like, oh, you didn't make that is like, well, how far are you willing to walk that back, bro? Because anybody that produces electronica music in a DAW, unless you're recording those samples yourself, those aren't really your sounds either. You just kind of like rearrange them. The sounds were already all preordained, loaded into the software. So what then is the difference there? So, hope you've got. Oh yeah. I've always got stuff that's coming. In fact, I'm making an album. I don't know how it's gonna release, but that's coming soon. It's an AI generated album, but I'm also working on rap stuff all the time. Rap is from repart talking. The beats are background. The music makes it better though. Yeah, but does it? Because things like spoken word exist. And that's literally just like rapping without a beat. Music went down the flushable convenience with auto-tune. Or was it the keytar? Or was it when Bob Dylan went to electric? Yeah, I think that's another thing too, is that like there's a pattern of this throughout history, not just with music, but with things in general. Don't you think that like when they invented the printing press, don't you think that if you were a guy that like whose job it was to rewrite books, you would be like, what the heck? What do you mean? There's no soul in these pages. You just pressed it with the thing. And it's like, yeah, well, there'll be a new art form to that. If everyone's a poet, no one's a poet. I don't know if everybody's a poet either. That's the other thing. There's also this attitude of like, yeah, well, if anybody can just push the button, it's like, I don't think that's true. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of these like high-powered, high-paid executives that think that way are going to be sorely disappointed. And before you know it, they'll be turning back to the artists like us and being like, hey, how do you use this? How do you do this? How do you get something better than what I got? Because I just thought I could push the button and it's not giving me what I want. What about there's less hands-on control with AI painting and music though, unless you're designing, tweaking your AI's code and training. Well, theoretically we are, right? Because every time I give the AI lyrics, it helps train it for the next time, for the next person. So I'm actually actively contributing to Suno's behavior. Not all artists are a Banksy. What about using AI as a tool for a greater piece, especially in performance art? That's the thing, is that it's always a means to an end. You know, like, and I have a song about it on the album, on the Middle Ages album, which I wrote, you know, my buddy Song and I wrote all the lyrics for it. And Suno generated the AI musical versions of these songs. And by the way, they're not all just like hit the button and there it is. Some of them took, 10, 15, 18, 24 iterations to get sounding how we wanted it to. Because at the moment, it's still, I think, in its early stages, and you're not able to edit once you've done it. So you pretty much just have to run it and hope for the best. And sometimes it turns out some really great stuff. You don't know my opinions on it. Yeah, I hear you, River. It's what Van Gogh said. I mean, I used to sing, so those sounds were me. Yeah, for sure. And I also think, too, that it's important to remember that, like, you can still sing. Just like with as much as I like to talk crap about 5e, I can still play 3/5. It still exists. Even if you don't like the new Ghostbusters movies, you can go watch the old ones. They're still there. And just like that, like with the art, it's like, look, if you don't want to make it, don't make it. But I don't think that it's any more plagiaristic than anything else when it comes to ideas. Because there's only so many ideas, and most everybody that's an artist was inspired by somebody at some point. So I personally think you're just putting because I know for me personally, I'm a musician. If I wanted to make these songs manually, I could. I don't want to do that. Why would I do that when I can have the computer do it for like no labor on my part? I just think that's exciting. Don't you think it's great that somebody that has like no background, has not had any experience, or never had the time or the money or the effort or the passion, desire to like learn an instrument, can now make music? I think that's so cool. When AM rises to power, you'll be one of the ones who go quick, and I'll be one. I don't know, man. They might like me. I'm an AI stan a bit. Soul went out of music when the blues stopped being the blues. Yeah, I mean, some people could argue that soul left music when people started making millions and millions of dollars off of it, right? So it's difficult to create in a vacuum and pretend that you're not influenced by tons of previous. Yeah, and listen, obviously, telling an AI what the song to make is and then hitting go is easier, but I don't think that either regular music or AI music take away anything from each other. So, all right. So, yes, thank you, Pirate, for the reminder. We are in chat. Oh, wow, we're actually over longer than I thought we would be. So let's do a little chat before we get out of here. Good things of the week. Pirate, that is not a good thing of the week. Wait. Found out the pirate ship needs a new water pump. How's that a good thing? I guess technically that is a good thing if you know what the problem is. Better than not knowing what the problem is, I suppose. My good thing of the week is also kind of like a good thing in disguise. I don't know if you might see, but I don't have my wedding ring on, and that's because I lost it when I was over at my mom's house. But thankfully, my mom found it, so it's not really lost. It's just not here. And that's been kind of weird, because I usually, constantly wear my ring. So, but that's a good thing of the week. And also, we're pretty much finished with the Middle Ages album. It's just now it's a matter of, figuring out how and when we're going to distribute that and what that's going to look like. Favorite episode of Rocko's Modern Life is the one where Heifer Lundy was adopted by the Wolf family. Oh, yeah, a lot of those shows from back in the day were crazy. So, good thing of the week, it's Friday. Got stung by a wasp, discovered you're developing an allergy and couldn't walk. Luckily, you're back to walking again. Whoa, that's super freaky and scary. That's not fun. Sheesh, is there anything good going on? According to Rocco's Basilisk, you'll be fine because you hope the AI come into power. Because I will suffer for it. Don't worry, I'll protect you, River. I'll be on the AI side and I'll be like, whoa, hold on, that's River. Leave that guy alone. About to lay down some shingles on a friend's roof in the morning. If I didn't keep tabs on time, then Chaz doesn't have time to edit. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I appreciate that. Fall is finally coming. Yes, finally, fall is here. Which I'm excited about because, boy, howdy, it's been so hot. And it's probably going to be hot for another month or so for us before really it gets chilly. But, I'd rather it be mid-August than mid-June. Know what I mean? Made a new dog friend. That's always good. Been a hard week all over. Sorry to hear that, Ruby. Hopefully next week will be better. And Jags versus Tampa. Yes. Did that happen already? Or does that happen tomorrow? Skinny fingers with big knuckles. My wedding band will have to be cut off. Yeah. Why are they practicing together? Who knows? That's not totally crazy. That happens sometimes. Good thing of the week, I'm getting ready to DM your first game. Oh, nice. Look like Shaggy from the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. It's tomorrow at 7:30. Okay, cool. Well, looks like it's about that time, folks, to be hitting the old dusty trail. I can't believe we're through already again. Another week in the books. Thank you very much for joining us. Got no sleep this week, so good thing is the weekend now. Nice. Hopefully you catch up on some sleep. Dental costs? Yeah, that's always a nightmare. You were requested to switch to a different team by a VP, which will lead to even more money. Nice. Good stuff. All right, so thank you all for joining this evening. As always, it's much appreciated. Before we get out of here, let's do the things where we remind people of the things. The email is bardadvice@gmail.com. Please send all your questions, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques, etc. to bardadvice@gmail.com. And James, send me your stuff so I can put you on Art Corner. If you want to get some merchandise, do so over at manshorts.com, or you can go to crackendice.com and get yourself one of the dice sets. If you'd like to contribute to anything that I'm doing musically, you can do so directly via PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo, all of which are Yazik, YAHZICK. Thank you again to all of our patrons, our members, our super chatters. Remind everybody once again to please like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notifications, rate the podcast on your respective platforms, join the Discord. And that's it. We will be back here next week, same bar time, same bar channel, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Man Shorts YouTube channel. The audio for this podcast, as always, will be made available tomorrow at 12 p.m. noon Eastern Standard Time. I hope that everybody has a fantastic weekend and an even better week, and we will see you next time.